in the SharePoint space, I feel like I've done it all, from deployments and been in the administrator role. I've also been in the developer role. I received certification for professional development from Microsoft back on the 2010 platform. So that might date me a little bit, but just to give you some background on kind of where I come from. The Masco Corporation is a family of companies that make home building products. And you may recognize some of our brands in North America, probably Delta Faucet and Behr Paint are our most recognized brands. And in Europe and many other countries around the world, Hans Grohe is a pretty well-recognized brand. And so again, the theme for Masco is to deliver better living possibilities for our customers, for our employees. And we are publicly traded here in the US, so also for our shareholders. Masco itself was founded in 1929 by an Armenian immigrant named Alex Manoogian. And he grew the company and eventually handed it over to his son, Richard Manoogian, who continued to grow the company until we're here today with over 18,000 employees across the globe in manufacturing facilities in North America and internationally as well. That's kind of a brief overview of where we are. A little bit deeper into the inner workings of Masco. So Masco's companies are kind of, from an IT perspective, we're in a federated model. And what that means is each of those companies, what we're trying to do is have the company manage the parts of their business that differentiate them in their chosen space. And from an IT perspective, centralize the things that are more commodity based. So your things like email, or again, even like the Microsoft 365 platform. Right now, for all of our North American companies, we have one tenant. We're exploring if that makes sense to take our European companies into the same tenant or keep them in a separate tenant. We have some ongoing discussions with Masco right now, and being in multiple tenants with different companies is presents some challenges, especially in the intranet space, especially in digital transformation, but we're working through those. So that's that's kind of a general overview of Masco and myself.
Sounds good. Sounds very good. It's going to be an exciting discussion. So let's just go according to our plan here, right? So
okay.
Can you tell us, unless you want to proceed otherwise, but so what was kind of the initial situation you were in some years ago, and what were the needs for the new digital communication tools?
Right. So over the years, our intranet had become very disjointed, and we actually had 3 different intranets, and we were sending users from different companies to various pages on those intranets, and they were linking to us in different ways, and there was no consistency. And this really presented a problem for our corporate communications department, because they had no way to effectively message or get messages out to all of our different companies. And that was having a negative impact, where there was some key people in the organization that were missing announcements, missing news. And so it also generated a lot of confusion at the end user level, not knowing where to go to get content. So I'm going to use my slides here for a minute. And so our path to intranet maturity was broken. And there's a tagline I put under the title here: technology drove the business instead of the business driving the technology. And that's a really, really key point. That's really somewhere we got lost in our journey. And so where we had our strengths were in business process automation. I mean, this goes back to, again, I'm going to date myself a little bit, but when we were leveraging InfoPath, it's a dirty word now, but at the time, 10 years ago, InfoPath, we leveraged that pretty heavily to automate a lot of back office processes that were still done with paper and interoffice mail. And again, there was a lot of success with that. We deployed different technologies like NewsGator, for instance, an add-on for SharePoint from a while ago, around some initiatives to try to get employees to collaborate and engage our culture a little more. And if you're seeing my slide, the The things that we missed were, again, the basic blocking and tackling, the basic fundamentals of what an intranet needs to have to be successful. So while we were doing things like automating and trying to promote collaboration, we weren't taking care of the basic needs of the user. And this next slide gets a little bit wordy, but I'm hoping that some in the audience can identify with this, because this is the scenario we were in. You know, somebody creates a site to share information with you, and they send you the link, and you bookmark it. That person leaves the company, or you leave that company. A new person comes in. They don't know that the site exists, or they don't know where that document is. They can't find it, and so they request another site, or they somehow obtain a copy of that document and post it somewhere else. So now that one gets bookmarked. And as this goes on and on as a pattern, now you've got 100 bookmarks that are stored in Internet Explorer probably. And so heaven forbid you have to change browsers or get a new machine and that doesn't get pulled over. But the bottom line is you ultimately can't find the information that you're looking for. So you end up emailing someone. And even if they can find it, you still email it to somebody because you have no confidence that the one that you found is the accurate version. And so again, if you're going through these steps, it just becomes a vicious cycle of, again, users not being able to find the information that they need when they need it, where they expect to find it. And I've highlighted that at the bottom of this slide, so there's no single version of the truth. And that is the problem that we set out to solve. How do we reduce this confusion and really examine how do we get to that single source of the truth and provide a user experience that our end users can easily navigate in an intuitive fashion. And again, if I back up to that previous slide, the technology drove the business instead of the business driving the technology. One of the reasons we got in this situation is because for a long time, due to turnover in positions and whatnot, our IT department owned our intranet. And again, if you've been in a company where IT owns your intranet, you know that over time, the intranet starts to look like IT. And that's why you're seeing this graphic here. What are we good at? Well, we're good at the business process automation. We're good at applying tools to problems. But what's missing here is we didn't understand or know the problem that we were trying to solve. And that's what we needed the business engagement for. So really, it was when we had a corporate communications manager who was very instrumental in driving this process and actually led the process. And I was her liaison within IT, partnering with her on that. And this is ultimately where we started, is what do we need in our intranet to be successful? And that's what you're seeing, those two X's at the bottom. We need to create an employee services portal. We need to drive our company culture, or give corporate communications a platform to drive our company culture. And once we establish those fundamentals, then we can grow our maturity to do more collaborative things. And obviously, we're going to continue to automate processes. So how do we go about this? How do you even get started? And again, the goal here is to define a single source of truth. The first thing that I recommend, and what has made our initiative successful, is you have to have a business owner. Now, again, without having polled the audience, I don't know how many people are coming from an IT background or coming from a business background, but a key action is to have a defined business owner as far as who is going to own your intranet, and take a strategic lead in that. And again, there has to be that partnership with IT, because IT is going to own the tool set, own the technical platform, but they should not own the content or how it's laid out. And so that's really important. It's got to be a partnership. And in the space I'm in now, business relationship management is primarily my job role. And we talked about IT doesn't need to be aligned with the business, because using that term aligned implies that the business is going a direction and IT is always trying to catch up and get aligned to whatever that direction is. And so with the way that we approached it, I would use the word convergence. IT is actually part of the business. They're not just over here in a silo. And so IT needs to be, treated like they're part of the business and act like they're part of the business. And what that means is getting to the table early in discussions that involve technology, and really trying to get into the different functional areas and understand what their problems are and what they're trying to solve. So again, with that type of a partnership in place in our scenario, we were able to define what our users need. And in the note there, it says news, apps, resources, and calendar. We'll talk a little bit deeper about that in a minute. And then again, a light governance strategy, define where everything belongs. Again, talking to our end users through various focus groups and one-on-one meetings, and getting anecdotal feedback about getting in the mind of an end user and putting things in a place that they would expect to find it, and then bringing it all together. So that, again, I kind of covered a lot of ground there, but that was our original problem that we were trying to solve. And these were the first steps that we took to try to solve it.
Yeah, makes sense. In that listing with multiple bullets, I can already imagine it would be a script for, one of those 2-minute animations where you have those animated figures scratching their heads and not finding the information, advertising.
Yeah.
Typical story, I would say. Okay, so out of all the available solutions and providers, so then you decided to go with the Valo product here and partner Red Level. So can you explain something, the decision, like the reasons behind those decisions and how it all went?
Yeah, so again, focusing on bullet point 2 on this slide, defining what your users need. I mentioned in my note there's news, apps, resources, and calendar. Really, the secret sauce, or like the main feature that we discovered was causing our breakdown, was the lack of a global navigation. And so again, at this point in time, this is almost a little under 2 years ago, we were in a situation on SharePoint on premises in the SharePoint 2013 version, and we had a lot of different site collections. And we had each site collection had a different top navigation and a different side navigation. And even though we had an intranet that was tying some things together, it wasn't consistent, because as soon as you'd navigate to a new site collection, you'd get a new navigation scheme. And through various conversations and working through this, we established that as the #1 feature that we needed to have in order to make this initiative successful. And at that point, we went to the drawing board and started looking at what's the right way to do this. So first we looked internally. Well, and again, if I back up even further, at this point, we're in the on-premise SharePoint environment. We have E3 licenses in a Microsoft 365 tenant. What was called Office 365 at the time, I guess. But we hadn't migrated to that tenant. So ultimately, we were paying for a solution that we weren't using fully. We had migrated to our Exchange environment to Office 365, but we hadn't migrated our collaboration sites, or we hadn't migrated our intranet. So again, I guess that's another one of our drivers, is leveraging services that we're paying for but not using, the opportunity to simplify. And around that time is when the SharePoint modern interface started to come out, and hub sites were in preview. And so again, we came to the conclusion that we needed to move to the modern interface in SharePoint Online. And at that point, with hub sites in its infancy, we started to test whether hub sites would work for us in building our global navigation scheme. And ultimately, being in its infancy, again, my timeline's a little bit fuzzy, but it was around the time that it was in preview going into general availability. It didn't have the feature set that our corporate communications department needed. So with that, we started to look at, okay, can we develop something internally using the SharePoint framework that would allow us to have a global navigation that, filled in some of the gaps over what the hub sites were able to do. And so we looked at that. We looked at a couple other vendors that had, solutions that were similar, but maybe not exactly the same. And ultimately, where we got exposure was through Red Level to Valo. So a little bit about Red Level. Red Level is one of Masco's partners that helps us with our digital transformation. Right before we started this initiative, we had a strategy session with Red Level that was very productive, and it had IT, corporate communications, and Red Level kind of leading that strategy session. And our goal was, again, to define what this new intranet should have and what it should look like. And the outcome was actually, it drove us to develop our entire Microsoft 365 strategy around which applications to prioritize, and how to roll out OneDrive and Teams and other things. So again, that strategy session was a success. The other thing that Red Level was doing at this time was hosting local SharePoint user groups. And again, as they were starting their partner with Valo, they had Seb and Vlad come to that SharePoint user group and kind of talk about Valo, show Valo, and show what it could do. And basically, as soon as I saw what they were doing with some of their features, saw the global navigation features that they demonstrated, it was just like that aha moment of like, that's it. And as soon as I showed that to our corporate communications department, they had the same aha, yep, that's it. We want that. So again, Valo, I'm probably preaching to the choir here because we're at Valo Fest, but it looks great in the UI. But again, with the various modules that Valo has, the one that we really seized on that we needed to launch our new initiative, there's a bunch of other web parts and modules that are great, but it was really that global navigation that really ultimately drove us to adopt Valo or to choose Valo.
Mm-hmm. That's exciting. I heard Seb and Vlad also enjoyed that trip. I remember that.
And I want to add to that a little bit too, because again, this might not be the right place for it in the conversation, but I had the opportunity to go to the Sharepoint conference last year. And again, Seb and Vlad had presented there as well, did a great job. But Valo had also made it onto one of the keynote slides where they're a gold partner. We've had a relationship with Red Level for a little bit longer, but really with Valo for about 2 years now. And one of the other reasons, so I kind of explained why we chose Valo. One of the other things that I'm seeing is Valo having that gold partner status. They're getting access to the features that are coming out of Microsoft much earlier than we are. And what's exciting about that is kind of going through various upgrades and working with Red Level to continue to update Valo, seeing a little bit behind the curtain and how it's structured and how it works. What I'm most excited about is they're not building their own tool, going their own direction. They're very much aligned with the direction that Microsoft is taking their collaboration suite, their Microsoft 365 tools. So when I look at different things that they're doing, even like the global nav features that I'm talking very positively about, those are not like, how would I describe it? Those aren't Valo going and building their own thing independent of Microsoft's direction. Microsoft's direction was hub sites for that, and again, now home sites. Valo's development model is to take what Microsoft's doing and build on top of it. And because of that, I have a high degree of confidence that the solutions that we're using, we're not going to come to some fork in the road where Microsoft is going a different direction than what Valo is, and we have to make a choice on what's the best direction for us to go, because they're aligned in the direction they're going. They're leveraging the Microsoft tools under the covers to deliver a lot of their solutions. I don't want to get too technical, but again, like with Teamwork and the Valo provision, or the Azure functions that it's using for provisioning and things like that, I'm really confident in the direction that this is going.
But I think we could go a little bit technical. I mean, the provisioning and the teamwork part is definitely something I'm sure you have it in your plans as well to talk about today, because how you're managing that kind of the collaboration part is really, really exciting as far as I've heard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, Red Level, like we've continued to partner with them to help us manage Valo, and that's worked really well. So again, based on Masco's IT model, we're really looking to leverage partners to kind of do things in areas that we don't have the resources or that we don't have the expertise. And so we've leveraged them heavily for various strategy sessions. We've had, I'll reference another engagement, but we're really engaging with them at a strategic level to help guide us in how we're deploying these tools. We've leveraged them for training sessions on Teams and on SharePoint Online, various Microsoft 365 technologies, and again, the continuous delivery. With our engagement, we're getting quarterly updates from Valo, so we're always staying fresh and getting the new features that they're coming out with. And Red Level is taking a bulk of that from us. They're testing it in their environment and going back and forth with Valo on bug fixes and enhancements before it even gets to our tenant. They're already basically doing our UAT testing for us before they even come to us and announce the new features. And we have working sessions based on our security where we have to run the commands in our tenant. But again, side-by-side working sessions where we're deploying these updates quarterly. And it's a pretty smooth experience for me and for my team with Red Level guiding us through that and taking a lot of the UAT testing for us.
Awesome. So Chris Stevenson, what have been the results from out of all this work and the initiatives and projects that you have run?
So I'll give a little bit of a taste. This is what our intranet looks like now. And it's kind of funny as I looked at this preparing this slide, it looks a lot different than when we originally launched it. And as you can probably see, and again, I made sure there's no proprietary information. Any numbers that you're seeing there are public information that we're pulling from public sources. But COVID, obviously COVID has impacted everybody. And again, I guess I didn't think about this when preparing this presentation, but we leveraged Valo features very heavily as our HR department and our corporate communications department created resources in our intranet to kind of help employees deal with COVID in numerous ways, physical, emotional, financial, and work health, self-screening links, building out various other portal pages, using Valo tabs and other Valo web parts, Valo quick links. We're leveraging a lot more than just global nav now. And again, so this is what our intranet looks like now. Again, this is a static screenshot, but as you can see at the top, we have our global navigation, and we've really divided it into 4 main areas. Again, I had a previous slide where I said there's really 4 things that we need for basic blocking and tackling on an intranet. There's news, there's events, there's applications, and resources. And if you're looking at this screenshot, you can see we've actually got a couple different categories of news. And part of that's because Masco, being the parent company, has 2 different audiences. We have our corporate offices, and then we have the entire enterprise. And so we've got an enterprise news stream that gets pushed out to all of our companies. We've got an industry news stream, which is, again, pulling from public sources with any, again, public information that's out there about Masco. We've got events, and again, this is static, so I can't scroll down and show you that we've got the events list there, but it's all working really well. And what corporate communications has effectively done is kind of retrain our user base to go here for everything. This is where our users go to find information, and they've made a very concerted effort to do that. Even so far as we had other digital signage in the building, we had physical signage in our building that we've since removed because, again, those messages get stale, and this is where we're keeping everything up to date. And so it's been a slow evolution, and there's been some bumps in the road, but this is now where our user base understands to go for anything. Even if there is email communication that goes out, that email communication says to reference MNet, which is what we're calling our intranet. So we've got news, we've got events you're seeing at the bottom of this page. If I expanded that top navigation, that's our global navigation, and that's what we like to call the edges of the map that is everything in Masco. If I expanded company information, that's where a lot of our HR things, the history of our company, our brands, our logos, our policies, like all of that stuff that drives a company culture is what we would put under that tab. Corporate functions, that's the resources that our office provides. And it's really our advertisement to the rest of the companies and the rest of the enterprise on what services we offer. Tools and applications includes homegrown solutions and power apps, even linking back to the few info platforms we still have to migrate, but also third-party systems like our expense reporting and our travel sites and various other third-party applications that would be needed. And then the 4th tab there is for teams. And like I said, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But what I'm trying to demonstrate by showing you this screenshot is this is how we've put those 4 things into action. And this is where we've trained and really, I don't want to use the word forced because I think that's too strong, but just over time, as it's gained momentum, this is where everybody has learned to go.
Wow.
Other anecdotal wins, again, just based on feedback to corporate communications, feedback to IT. Like I said, there's been increased employee satisfaction. People know where to go now. This is another anecdotal thing. We no longer put out links to specific pages or specific sites. Instead, we put out instructions. Go to MNet and go under corporate functions and select IT to find our IT information. We're instead of, again, trying to get away from bookmarking individual links and saving them outside to training people to use the navigation to find what they need. So again, we've got increased employee satisfaction. We went from 3 intranets to 1, so we now have one place we're sending everybody. That's done a lot to reduce confusion. We removed a lot of stale content during the process, probably about 25, maybe 30% stale content. That's huge from a discoverability standpoint. We've had reduced calls to the help desk. And again, from a hard numbers standpoint, it greatly increased the adoption that we saw in SharePoint Online. When we launched this, our active user rate was 16% for SharePoint Online. At this point in time, it's well over 50%.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and that growth happened probably over a year's worth of time, and those are pre-COVID numbers that I'm referencing there. So yeah, we've had a lot of wins anecdotally. We've had concrete wins. We were able to, again, moving from on-prem to online. There were some other third-party solutions that we were paying for in our on-prem environment that we were able to turn off and cancel and stop paying for. There was some of the intranets one of the 3 intranets we had was external to our SharePoint environment. We were able to cancel that and save money. So again, there's a lot of wins as the result of this transformation. Kind of transitioning a little bit beyond that, out of that strategy session, and this may seem really intuitive now as people become more and more familiar with Microsoft 365, but defining for users where content goes and then training them on that. And the 3 main collaboration applications that we're using today in Microsoft 365 are OneDrive for Business, Teams, and SharePoint Online. And we've got this graphic here that kind of defines for a user what goes where. And so if you go through that flow chart in your head as an end user, this is a personal document. It should go in OneDrive. Again, personal work content. This is something I need to collaborate on with the rest of my team or with a specific project or a continuous improvement team, something like that. That should go in Microsoft Teams. We should create a team for that. Is this something that's general knowledge? This is a completed policy that I need to share with everybody. That more formal content, the more formal tone, that goes in SharePoint Online in our MNet intranet, again, leveraging those Valo features. So this is kind of another big deal, not just in launching a technology and throwing a tool at people, but also training them on how to use it. And again, in a lot of this training, it's not even necessarily, I would say, a training. I mean, we're showing them the features, but it's more of a dialogue, trying to understand how do our users work? What problems are they trying to solve on a daily basis? How can we apply this technology to their problems rather than having technology that's in search of a problem? Let's identify what the problem is and see where this fits. And ultimately, again, the same graphic from earlier in the slide presentation, we've now got that foundation. And what we're seeing now, and again, this is kind of transitioning into the COVID period. Thank goodness that we had this established, because the communication has been a lot more smooth and people were a lot more prepared to adopt the technology that they've needed to be successful in a remote working environment. So we've got that employee services portal well established. We're driving the company culture through it. And now that collaboration piece, that's happening in Microsoft Teams. And again, a quick note on COVID and our adoption efforts with Teams. Again, we were probably at about, actually, I think I've got it up here on another screen. You know, through this initiative, we were at about a 15% adoption rate based on active users in Teams a year ago. Now we're at 60%. And again, we had about a 20% jump in March. And again, that's obviously based on the COVID-19 situation.
That's so again, a concrete number right there, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a huge jump. And again, to be fair, we were climbing quite a bit prior to that. In February, we were up to about 40%, but it really took off. And it was, again, a silver lining, not to belittle the impact that this had on people's lives in a negative way. But I think it was Satya Nadella that I'm sure a lot of people said something similar, that we've gone through 5 years of digital transformation in 2 months. And I'm probably misquoting that. It might be 10 years. I don't know, but we've had users a lot more willing to adopt the technology solutions that we're putting out, and they're finding success. They're finding that it meets their needs. And there's a little bit of surprise around that, which is, I'm laughing, but it's a little discouraging that they're surprised that the solutions we're rolling out are working. But it's made the transition seamless for a lot of people, and that's been great.
Sure. So what is, I mean, you've been dropping a lot of like secret sauces and ideas, but just kind of to wrap up, what would be your secret sauce for a successful launch? Because I think it takes a lot to achieve the situation where you are today, where you can say, this is the place people go for the information. So do you have perhaps like a message to wrap this up to others planning their intranet renewal?
Yeah, I would, the first thing I would reference is what I said earlier. Business drives technology. Technology doesn't drive the business. If we can get that set from the get-go, you're going to have a lot more success. The other thing I would say is, again, referenced earlier, you got to have that business owner and you got to have that IT convergence. And again, if I'm talking to an IT audience, we need to get out into the functional areas and really understand what their problems are, understand what their needs are, and try to apply technology, which is our domain, to help solve those needs, meet those needs, and solve those problems. And again, it really requires active ownership and engagement on that business side, having that champion. So on this slide, I'm covering some current next steps of where we're at in our process, because it's never finished. Everything I've showed you is foundational. It's the got to haves. What we want to do next is take it to the next level. And yeah, so again, I'm going to make sure I answer that question. Again, those are the things I think are the secret sauce: the business driving technology, the ownership outside of IT, and really that convergence with the business and IT. Anecdotally, what we've seen, and I've got this on this current slide, the second bullet point. One of the things we've been able to do with Valo, because all of our North American companies are in the same tenant, they all have their own intranets. Some of them were Sharepoint based, some of those were based on other solutions. And we've been able to take what we've learned in implementing our intranet and sort of rinse and repeat that for our other companies. They have their own local intranets for their companies. And because they're also leveraging our tenant, we were able to package, and again, kind of stealing from Valo on this intranet in a box, we were able to take the technology platform, Valo, partner that with our process and our resources, put them together and offer an intranet in a box solution to our other companies and allow them to replicate our success. And so far, we've done that at 3 companies. And we've got a couple more on the radar for 2020 to get moved to an intranet in a box solution based on Valo in SharePoint Online. And that's where you start to really drive value, because not only the solution that we're paying for with Valo and SharePoint Online, we're leveraging that more to get more value out of it, but also the learning that we did along the way, we're able to reuse. And the time that some of these other companies have been able to go from 0 to having, a basic intranet is being measured in weeks, not months. Okay. So that's a huge win for us. And again, that's one of the keys to success. If you're in a situation like us where you're in a larger enterprise and you have multiple intranets, it's something where you can replicate that success. Again, just calling out some features where other features we're using. Valo Teamwork. Again, this is also in a partnership with Red Level. We recently went through a lifecycle management engagement with Red Level to establish a very light governance policy on how we're going to manage teams' lifecycle. And really, SharePoint sites with an Office 365 group behind them as well, to make sure that we're expiring those at the right time and that we have the right cleanup process for those. But also on the front end, an ordering process. Valo Teamwork is one of those modules. Not sure what experience there's out there with that, but we're leveraging that to have our end users order Teams and SharePoint sites based on templates that we've worked through to provide the right functionality. So we're getting set to launch that. Again, the timing, unfortunately, it'd have been nice to have launched that prior to COVID when Teams really exploded. But we were in the middle of the process then, and as different resources got pulled onto other priorities, we weren't able to finish that in time for that. But we're still in really good shape and looking forward to rolling that out. That's going to be a big win for us. Again, the navigation solution that we have is working great, but it's time to take that to the next level and add some of Valo's personalization features that they offer in the navigation. There's a new feature, relatively new, Valo Event Hub. That's something we're very excited about because we've got a legacy system right now where we're managing the actual sign up for the events that are in our portal. So once we start looking at Valo Event Hub, we anticipate shutting down that legacy system and having all the event signups done within our intranet as well. The corporate communications department recently went through a Masco messaging project, and so we've got some branding to update, which is very easy now with Light Switch. Again, the Valo branding features, and again, we're still, because we had a lot of content and we've got a lot of custom processes built with, as I mentioned, InfoPath. We've also got quite a few built with Visual Studio Forms, Visual Studio SharePoint, state machine workflows, things of that nature. Event receivers. We're still cleaning up those in our on-premises environment and moving those into solutions that are based on Microsoft 365. So a lot going on, but like I said, we've come a long way. We got a long way to go, and we're pretty excited about where we're at and looking forward to the next steps.
All right. I guess that wraps it up. Chris Stevenson, thank you so much. It's amazing to hear your digital journey is really obviously unique, just like every company is. So thank you for sharing all of this with the audience. I hope people appreciate this as much as I do personally. It's an amazing story.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, everybody can ask questions now. So feel free you can raise your hand by pressing that button here on the bottom of your screen. So we will just let you speak up after that. So let's wait for the questions before we end this session. In the meanwhile, how's the weather in Michigan today?
It's pretty warm right now. It's summer here. Yeah, a little bit humid, but man, it's nice to see the sun shining.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, while we're waiting for questions, one of the other things that triggered in my mind watching Mark Cashman in the keynote, so he referenced Intrazone, which is his joint effort with Chris, I think it was Chris McNulty. Hopefully I got the names right there. That podcast was pretty influential on me. Probably like most companies, your company has a diversity and inclusion initiative of some kind. And I know there's a lot of focus on different aspects of that, but one aspect that's also often overlooked in diversity and inclusion is accessibility. And I'm going to actually put this link into the chat because I dug it up while listening to the keynote. Again, something didn't connect in my brain that this Mark Cashman was the one that was on the podcast, but I got it now. last year they did a podcast on accessibility, and this is a big topic when you're doing oops, I had to put that in twice. Hang on a second. It's a very big topic when you're looking at intranet and how do you make your intranet accessible and different things like that. And it's a lot. I'm gonna put this link in here. This particular episode was very, very helpful for me in understanding some of the challenges that people with non-conventional sight or non-conventional hearing can face when trying to interact with technology and various other accessibility issues. And to hear what Microsoft is doing in that space and how they're putting accessibility from the start and how they're designing their products, I think this is a huge message that we in the technology field need to make our users aware of, both from a training standpoint. So again, and because there's a lot of big things that come out about diversity and inclusion, and from where you might sit, you're like, how do I affect that? I don't really have a part to play in that, or you might feel isolated from it. But living in the technology space, there's a lot of little things that you can do to have an impact on that space, focusing on accessibility. And this goes back to the early days of the web, right? When you had to write HTML by hand and put alt text in your image tags, right? I mean, stuff like that. Or again, I see this. I work quite a bit in Power Apps and Power Automate now. In Power Apps, you're seeing the accessibility check before you published, where you can go add those accessibility labels on your controls, make sure that it tabs through properly, making sure that you have enough contrast between your controls and the text around them. So again, I would encourage everybody, if you're looking to get involved in diversity and inclusion and wondering where you can make an impact in your company and in your role, check out that podcast from the IntraZone. Again, it was very influential for me in how I look at things, and even how we evaluate software vendors now, trying to incorporate some of those processes to look at what are they doing, because we want to make sure that when we put out a technology product, that it's as inclusive as it can be. And again, I think in that podcast, if I'm remembering correctly, you're already seeing a lot of that, right? In transcripts in Stream, where it's auto-transcribing videos, various features they're baking into Teams and Teams meetings. It's really great to see, and it's an area that we can all get involved.
Yeah, it is definitely a growing topic. I can confirm that from our point of view as well. We are WCAG 2.1 certified for accessibility in our product. So we do get a lot of those requests nowadays. That's not only for website anymore, it's also for internal portals, for sure.
Yeah, that's great to see.
Yes, all right. Soon it's gonna be a time to start transitioning to the next session, which will start in 8 minutes in the same channel. It's gonna be amazing as well. So yeah, if there are any further questions for Chris or anybody or regarding the keynote, you can also go to Twitter and use the hashtag #AskValoFest. So you can ask questions that way, and they're gonna be picked up from there.
Awesome.
All right. So looks like there are no further questions here. So Chris Stevenson from Masco, once again, thank you so much for being here with us. Really appreciate.
Hey, thanks for having me. It was a good time.
Awesome. All right.
Looking forward to the rest of the sessions.
Likewise. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Bye.
Hi, this is Karine, your next speaker. I'm on the line.
Hello, Corinne. This is Vlad. How are you doing? Let me make you a presenter. There we go.
Okay. Let me go ahead and share my screen.
I can hear you perfectly, by the way.
Good. Well, that's the first test done, right?
That's the first test done.
So let me show screen one. Let's see if that
Awesome.
works.
And let me stop the recording from the previous session and I will